Have you ever wondered what the world would look like if Hitler had won World War II? The idea may seem far-fetched, a chilling notion that tugs at the edges of our collective historical memory. Yet, it's a question that serves as the foundation for a fascinating exploration into the realm of alternate history. This is not just a game of hypotheticals. It's a way to examine our past and present through a different lens, to challenge our understanding of the world and our place in it. Imagine, if you will, a world where the Axis powers emerged victorious from the fiery crucible of World War II, a world where the political landscape was forever altered by the triumph of Hitler's Third Reich. This is not our reality, but in the realm of alternate history, it's a possibility that's worth exploring. Alternate history is more than just a genre of fiction. It's a tool for analysis, a mirror held up to our own world that reflects back a reality that could have been. It's a fascinating exercise, a thought experiment that pushes us to consider the ripple effects of pivotal moments in history. It asks us to grapple with the complexities and contingencies of the past, and to imagine how different the world might be if key events had turned out differently. In this case, we're delving into a scenario where Hitler's war machine was not halted, where the Allies did not succeed in toppling the Third Reich. It's a daunting prospect, one that brings with it a host of questions. What would this alternate world look like? How would it function? What would be the implications for global politics, economics, and culture? It's these questions and more that we're going to explore in this video. We'll delve into the ramifications of this unthinkable victory, examining the potential outcomes and effects on the world stage. We'll venture into this alternate timeline, considering the consequences and pondering the what-ifs that such a scenario would inevitably present. So, let's dive into this alternate reality, where Hitler triumphs in World War II. Imagine for a moment the year is 1945, but the news that floods the airwaves is not of Allied victory, but of Hitler's. In this alternate timeline, Hitler's unthinkable victory would bring about immediate and drastic outcomes. While the world reels from the shock, Hitler would waste no time in consolidating his power in Europe. The Nazi regime, once confined to Germany, would now extend its terrifying reach across the continent. Countries that once stood proud and sovereign would find themselves under the oppressive rule of the Third Reich. The Nazis would swiftly implement their radical ideologies on a continental scale. Hitler's vision of a racially pure society would become the new norm, leading to unspeakable atrocities and human rights violations. The Holocaust, which claimed the lives of 6 million Jews, would have continued unabated, its horrors magnified across the whole of Europe. The fate of the Allied forces, once the beacon of hope in the face of the Nazi menace, would be uncertain in this new world order. Captured soldiers would likely face the grim prospects of prison camps or forced labor. The leaders of the Allied nations, if they had survived, would be forced into exile or worse. The expansion of the Nazi regime would not stop at Europe's borders. Hitler's insatiable hunger for power and domination would lead him to set his sights on the rest of the world. The ripple effects of his victory would reach far and wide, altering the course of history in unimaginable ways. In the East, the Soviet Union, once a formidable adversary, would find itself isolated and vulnerable. Hitler's victory would embolden Japan, leading to an expansion of its imperial ambitions. The balance of power in the world would be fundamentally shifted, tipping dangerously in favor of the Axis powers. With Europe under Nazi control, the world map redrawn, what happens next in this alternate timeline? The world has changed overnight. The Axis powers reign supreme. Imagine waking up to that reality, where Germany, Italy, and Japan are at the helm of global power. This Axis-dominant world would be a place of drastically redrawn borders and realigned alliances. Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, would likely claim large parts of Europe, Russia, and possibly even Africa. The continent's diverse cultures would be forced to bend to the will of the Führer, and the German Reich would be the epicenter of global power. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, would extend its influence across the Mediterranean and into North Africa. The Roman Empire's glory days would be echoed in this new world order, with Italy positioned as a significant maritime force. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japan would likely seize control of large parts of East and Southeast Asia, creating a sphere of influence where the land of the rising sun would cast a long shadow. But what of the neutral and defeated countries? Their fates would be contingent on their strategic value and their willingness to cooperate with the Axis powers. Some might retain a semblance of autonomy, while others would be absorbed into the territorial expansions of the victorious nations. The United States, having been neutral for much of the war, might be left relatively unscathed, but its global influence would be significantly diminished in this Axis-dominated world. And what of the United Kingdom, the last bastion of resistance against the Axis? It is likely that it would be forced into a reluctant alliance or suffer the fate of becoming a puppet state under the German Reich. This new world order would undoubtedly be a cauldron of tension and conflict. The power dynamics between Germany, Italy, and Japan could lead to a fragile alliance, with each vying for dominance and control. But with every action there's a reaction. How does the rest of the world respond to this new order? In our reality, the Cold War was a tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, but in this alternate timeline, the players are different. Imagine a Cold War not with the hammer and sickle against the stars and stripes, but rather with the Axis powers playing the antagonist. The United States, still a major global power, finds itself locked in a tense geopolitical chess match with Germany and Japan. The Iron Curtain in this world isn't drawn across Europe, but rather stretches across the Atlantic and the Pacific, dividing the world into distinct spheres of influence. The ideological struggle would have been different too. Instead of capitalism versus communism, we'd be looking at a clash between democratic principles and fascist ideologies. The United States, standing as the last bastion of democracy, would have been pitted against the totalitarian regimes of Hitler's Germany and Imperial Japan. Just like in our timeline, proxy wars could be a likely occurrence. Countries in Africa, South America, and Asia could become battlegrounds for these superpowers as they vie for influence and resources. Resistance movements would be a significant factor as well, with freedom fighters working to undermine the Axis powers from within their own borders. In this alternate Cold War, the nuclear arms race would take on a new dimension. In our world, the United States was the first to develop nuclear weapons, but in this alternate timeline, with Germany's advanced technology, it's possible that the Axis powers could have been the first to unlock the atom's deadly potential. This would have set off a frantic race for the United States to catch up, leading to a nuclear standoff that could have been even more precarious than what we experienced in our own history. The space race, too, could have been drastically different. With Germany's advanced rocket technology, the moon might have been graced by the swastika before the stars and stripes. With a new Cold War brewing, the world is on the brink of a different kind of nuclear age. Fast forward to today, what does our alternate 2024 look like? In this hypothetical world where Hitler won World War II, the long-term impacts on today's society, geopolitics, technology, and culture are profound. In this alternate timeline, society might be starkly different. The Axis powers' ideologies could have permeated global society, potentially resulting in a world with less diversity and more uniformity. The principles of freedom and democracy that we hold dear today might be less prevalent, replaced with more authoritarian regimes. Geopolitically, the world map could look different, with the Axis powers holding more influence and territory. The balance of power would be tilted, and the international relations we know today might be unrecognizable. In terms of technology, one could argue that the technological advancements we've made could have been delayed or even never occurred. The space race, for example, was partly fueled by the Cold War tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. In this alternate world, with different global powers at play, this race might never have happened. Culture, too, would be greatly affected. The global spread of American and Soviet culture following World War II might have been replaced with German and Italian influences. This could have shaped the world's music, art, literature, and even our daily habits in ways we can hardly imagine. However, it's also possible that these Axis powers could have faced eventual regime change or collapse. After all, history has shown us that oppressive regimes often face resistance and rebellion. While it's impossible to predict exactly how this would play out, it's a potential reality in this alternate 2024. This alternate history presents a chilling yet fascinating exploration of what if. But it's also a reminder of the importance of the real events of World War II, the sacrifices made and the world they shaped.